Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good night. I had a question about these new vaccines that are coming out regarding how new they are and what the difference is between other vaccines. And so the end goal of any vaccine is to make antibodies. So they're not really too different from any other vaccine out there on the market already as far as their purpose. But they are different in the way they create these antibodies, that they create this immune response. So you need to go back to understand, you need to go back to like middle school or high school biology, depending where you went. And remember that a cell has the nucleus, right? Has the nucleus, and inside is the genetic code. And the DNA inside the nucleus, through some mechanisms, creates a signal to the rest of the cell to carry out the functions. And that signal or that message is received by the way of messenger RNA, right? This little single strand here. And so this messenger RNA is the way these vaccines are supposed to work, okay? And this is how they do it. So you have coronavirus. So here's your coronavirus. And the coronavirus has these proteins all around it. That's why they call it coronavirus, because it kind of looks like a crown to whoever coined that term. And these are called the spike proteins. And these spike proteins are the ones that attach to the cell. And when the cell is attached, it's able to release its own RNA into your cells. And then your cell, because it's programmed to recognize RNA and make, have function off this RNA, will start creating and reproducing a lot of these coronavirus inside of it. And eventually it just builds up that eventually coronavirus is released, and then the infection starts to multiply exponentially. Okay? So what these genius scientists did is they created this mRNA, right? They said, we just need to mount antibodies, create antibodies against some of these proteins here on the coronavirus so it can't get into the cell and reproduce, and that way effectively making you immune. So they took the spike protein and they found out the genetic sequence for it, and they created this mRNA with the proper code on there. Once they did that, they're like, well, if we can just introduce this code into the body and have the cell receive it, then the cell will make proteins that mimic or look exactly the same as the spike protein. So when the cell does that, if it successfully receives the message of the spike protein, then it'll start to produce the spike protein. It'll start to actually make the spike protein itself instead of the coronavirus, because that's all they're coding for. All they did was send the message to make the spike protein. And then the cell will release the spike protein into the bloodstream. So eventually the spike protein goes out into the blood, and it starts floating around out there. Okay, so now we have a bunch of this spike protein. And this spike protein does nothing. All it does is attaches to the cell, but it does nothing. So our immune system will come by, all our white blood cells, hey Bill, hey Larry, hey Tim, hey Stephanie, hey Susan. They all come by and they're like, hey, check this out. We've never seen this weird little purple thingamajig. What is this? And they recognize it as something foreign. And so they will mount an immune response. They're going to be like, we need to do something about this. And so they'll look at it, they'll, recruit other cells to come attack this random protein, and they'll just eat it up. But they'll also start the process of making antibodies against it. And that's what we wanted. We wanted our body to recognize this protein and make antibodies against it. So now in our blood, we have a bunch of these antibodies. We have a lot of the white blood cells that already recognize this type of protein and are ready to make antibodies at a moment's notice. So next time big old bad coronavirus comes around and thinks it's hot stuff, we're already ready to mount that response. And these antibodies will coat the coronavirus, effectively stopping it from even being able to get inside our cells, and we are immune. So that's the beauty of the way this vaccine works, and that's really just the way all vaccines work. They just make they all just have different ways of how to eventually create antibodies against whatever you're being vaccinated against. Okay, so the worry is, like I've heard some people ask, well, it's like genetic material. Is this going to make me some kind of mutant? Am I going to gain like, X-ray vision or anything like that? And no, that's not the case. mRNA does not change your genetic code. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. Okay. All right, guys. So hopefully that helps and helps you understand a little bit. I know it's real quick. I didn't want to dive into too much of the specifics about, biology and mechanisms, but I think it was pretty simple to understand. All right. Take care and have a nice night. Peace.